Welcome to our latest edition of CharitEpulse, our bi-weekly charity podcast. My name is Charles Mosquita, Charities Director at Quilter Cheviot Investment Management. I'm delighted to be joined by my regular musketeers, Catherine Ross-Jomji, leading charity Legal Beagle at Shakespeare Martineau, and James Saunders, charity partner at leading accountancy and audit firm Moore Kingston Smith. Together, we explore the latest pressing issues affecting the not-for-profit and voluntary sector. Don't forget, you can catch us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and on our various websites. We'd love to have feedback, so please do send us comments or questions. More the merrier. Now, normally, we look at what's going on in the world of the not-for-profit sector, but today I'm going to do something very different, because what I would like to do is to pick both of your brains about what it's like to be a trustee, because one of the things that we've been seeing over the last year has been some debate about people not understanding necessarily what the role and purpose. So I have a list of questions of which I have armed you before, so hopefully you have prepared. And I'm going to start with you, Catherine, if I may, on the first question about what is the role and the purpose of being a trustee?
And I'm going to give not a legal answer, I think, because there's enough guidance out there that says the legal duties of a trustee or this, that, and the other. I think the role and purpose is to do your best based on the skills, knowledge, experience, contacts, ideas, whatever comes into your head that's in the best interest of the charity. I think the biggest point I often say is that it's not about you. I think if you come into a trustee role and your ego is bigger than the reputation of the charity, that's not going to work. But I think it's about that element of humility, of listening to your fellow trustees, of being a team player, but ultimately just trying to do the right thing at the right time, but ultimately for the benefit of the charity.
James?
Yeah, that all sounds pretty sensible. I mean, I obviously with an accounting background, I would always focus on the safeguarding of assets type responsibility, which is only one part of this, but it's a big one, and it's increasingly becoming an even bigger one, with the focus on, as we have covered in on many occasions, the threat of external fraud, cybercrime, crimes in general, trying to steal money. So obviously this is, I've got my accountant's hat on there, but that's a big element of it.
Yeah, I mean, if I had three things, I'd say personally, it's helping set the strategic and the vision, isn't it, for the organization, being that sort of critical friend, and the oversight, which is where James, you've been talking about. So both of you have been trustees for a reasonable period of time. I think I'm sort of nearly 25, maybe 30 years. If you've never been a trustee, are there things that if you would take on the role that you should, one, be concerned about? So, or I suppose another way of asking the question, what are the risks of being a trustee? Shall I start with you, Catherine, again?
So I suppose there is that risk, depending on the legal structure of the charity and the activities that it carries out. So whether your charity is unincorporated and there is the potential for personal liability of the trustees, whether it's incorporated and you've got a limited liability structure, whether your charity is purely grant making, in which case the liabilities are not necessarily that risky. So I suppose things to be concerned about would be not understanding what it is you are joining and why. So I think sometimes there's a bit of a not so hidden ulterior motive why you're being asked to become a trustee. And I think you're not there as a token, score a point. You're not the diversity hire, I think was said recently in a discussion. It's those sorts of points. I think you're trying to make out that it's a genuine, they want you and you want them, so that you get that good fit from both sides.
James?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there's a real danger that you don't understand the true extent of the legalities of what you're getting involved in, the true extent of the responsibilities you hold. You a director as well as a charity trustee for Companies Act and corporate purposes. Do you have all those duties as well? Understanding that is important. But more operationally, I think the danger is you end up you're always in danger of getting involved in what you don't really know very much about, and that you're jointly and severally liable, to use a partnership terminology. But as a trustee, you much as we all segregate ourselves into subcommittees depending on specialisms, actually, you've got to be part of the team that is responsible for. In my world, if I'm an accountant, but I'm as much involved in the high level decisions on HR or education, or in schools curriculums, in charities fundraising, all that sort of stuff. You've got to be aware of all this stuff, and the buck stops with the trustee group as a whole, not with individual trustees who might be allocated for their particular specialisms. You've got to be very careful that you are only, you're doing your best, as Catherine said, but only to the extent that you are able to do that based on your own skills and experience.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing here is that you need to be aware of the risks, that you're taking on the responsibility, but not fearful of it. And I think the other thing I would just point out to people, because it could be quite daunting if you're not a trustee thinking about what those responsibilities are. But there are 800,000 in England and Wales. So according to the Charity Commission, individuals. And also, I think, not that it is written down as such, but being volunteers, you certainly, if there was a legal action against you, the courts would look at that sympathetically, I think. Would that be a fair thing to say, Catherine?
Yeah, it's whether you've acted honestly and reasonably and or fairly to be excused. So yeah, I think all of that is be a good egg and do your best, recognize your limitations. But yeah, the courts are not there trying to catch out trustees. Yeah.
So I suppose the next question I would ask is, why did you become a trustee? What was the motivation behind that? Shall I start with you, James, on this one?
Yeah, I did it for a number of reasons, and I've continued to do it for a number of reasons. I believe it helps me in my job, is one. I believe it helps me have empathy with clients if I am in their seats in some way, shape, or form. I believe it helps me with educating myself around different aspects of the business or the charity that I might not be. I always look at the accounts in a charity or an organization. Or the finances, that's my primary focus. So to be more involved in those wider aspects that aren't finance and accounts, I think always helps me with understanding my clients more. It is also rewarding. I always say that if I didn't work in the charity sector with charity clients in my job, I probably wouldn't still be an accountant. Likewise, there is that feeling of reward and achievement when you are helping non-profit, charity, education, any of those sort of organisations, where frankly, help and advice and services, I feel, are better appreciated.
Catherine?
I think all of those reasons work for me as well. My first appointment, though, I would say it was because they asked me. It was having a charity say to me, we would like you to be a trustee. We know you, we know what you offer, we know your personality, we think you'd be good for this. And actually that was a real kind of, I would take that sort of leap of faith from them, that if they believe in me and think I'm going to be useful, then I'm going to give this a go. And I don't know if I'm going to be any good, but for all the reasons James has said, I would say I get as much from it as I bring to my roles as being a trustee.
Yeah, I have to say, from my perspective, it's been a massive benefit from a work and from a personal basis. Hopefully I've been a positive contribution to the organisations I've been involved with. But you have an opportunity to get onto a board of a much younger at a much younger age than you might. I'm just thinking about all the people that I've met that I probably would never have met if I hadn't sat on boards. And the way that you're being asked to make a whole lot of decisions in areas that you know nothing about. And again, that's quite unique. Well, it's not unique to a charity or to a board, but at the age that you can become a trustee, which effectively is anybody over the age of 18, I think is the thing. So actually, there are so many benefits, and I think as a result of it, you might have to ask colleagues at work, but I think I'm a better manager and a better leader as a result of it. And my input to my work has been, I think, has a much greater depth than it would have done if I hadn't been a trustee. So I have to say, from a career point of view, I would definitely be a strong advocate for people to. And I also think it actually sends a very strong message to any employer about your values and things going on there. Anyway, so yeah, I think that's definitely a really key. So actually, we've answered the my next question, which was what did you gain personally as a trustee? So maybe we'll move on to the next one, which is, and Catherine, you did touch on this a little bit about how you've been approached to become a trustee, and whether you would ever consider making the first move, and if you did, how would you go about doing that?
Yeah, I would never consider making the first move. It's whether it's a British thing or just a Catherine thing, I don't know. I just think it's cringe. I don't like it. No, I don't want to. I'd rather know that they've got a kind of Catherine-shaped hole that they think I would fit into, rather than me trying to elbow my way in. I have only ever once applied in a kind of formal, here's the application form, send your CV, blah blah blah, for a role, and I didn't get it. Yeah, and we should pause there, I think, for the audience, Charles, to go, what? That's outrageous. But yeah, it was for the school where my children were both pupils, and I had applied to be a governor and I didn't get in. And I knew the vice chair of governors, who was just incensed that they didn't know I'd applied. They didn't realise I hadn't got in because you had to be elected by the parents, not by the existing governors, blah, 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 blah. But I took it as a sign from God that I was too busy. They didn't want me, didn't need me, not doing it. But I think for me, I just find it interesting that there's sometimes, I think, is too much promotion about you should advertise trustee vacancies as though it is a job role. And I hate doing a covering letter. I hate sending my CV in. And if you're going to ask me to apply in that way, chances are I won't, which I don't think makes for a flawed recruitment process. I just think it's horses for courses. And I think in this example, the board would say there that that process did not give them the outcome that they would have wanted from it, but it was the inclusive process they'd chosen to follow. Whereas all my other roles, it's charities I've known for a long time. It gradually, where the trustees have said, actually, now would be a really good time. We would love to have you on the board. Yeah.
Brilliant. James?
I often say to my team, as they're coming through and progressing through qualification and maybe looking forward to a career in, a further career, an extended career in finance somehow, and accountancy, and particularly in the charity sector, go and look, and maybe if you wanted to do that trustee role, go and find something that you've got a personal interest in, rather than just go and apply willy-nilly for whatever. Find something that you can genuinely get invested in, whether that is, obviously a lot of them are sports focused for a lot of the young men in particular, well, the young men and women coming through. But of course, those roles equally are quite popular for applicants. So there'll be quite a few applications on that front. But I do think it should be, certainly first ventures into trusteeship. It will help enormously if you've got a personal interest, a personal involvement somehow. Maybe it's a medical charity that you've a family member involved in, something like that you genuinely want to give something back to, put something into. I think that probably makes a huge difference to how you go about that first appointment, if you like, and what you put into it.
Yeah, I have to say I've been invited 4 times to sit on a board. I'm not very good at saying no either, which is thing, but I've only ever approached once. I think this is probably more for people who haven't got established networks and haven't got the connections and everything else. And actually pick up the telephone and go and ask. And even if you just start off as a volunteer, but say you'd be really interested in being a trustee. I've got a young colleague in the office who joined our charities team a couple of years ago. And in fact, she's ended up being a trustee on a multi-academy school. But she definitely had to do the first move, and she's been absolutely fantastic in her role and really things. So I think there is, because a lot of this is actually charities don't know necessarily where to look, which is sometimes when they go and advertise, and then you've got people who don't know who to go and ask. But I think, definitely find organizations, my advice, where you have a natural interest in what they are doing and you want to further that purpose.
I think it's really interesting though, isn't it, on charity websites, many will now have a donate here button, but
Yeah.
where is the support now button for someone to say, I would like to support your charity. I'm thinking in a voluntary role like this. I'm thinking a potential trustee. I'm thinking a member of a committee that you might have. Where is the opening for somebody to find your charity and be able to put themselves forward? I think, there needs to be a bit of that. You could make it more welcoming for those that might stumble across your charity and be able to suggest something, rather than we only do that if we've got a deliberate vacancy that we're looking to fill. You think for your succession planning, it should surely be an ongoing process.
What a fantastic idea. Ooh, I think we should explore this one further about having a volunteer now button.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there are a lot of people who would actually be really interested in doing that, just don't know how to go about doing it.
Yeah.
Or are a little bit, a little bit shy at putting themselves forward. Yeah. That's a better way of thinking about it. So my next question is, what advice would you give to somebody thinking about and getting involved with a charity? We've probably covered quite a lot of this. And what do you wish that you had done differently with your first trusteeship?
Will I start on that one? I mean, there's the point about getting personal involvement, which I've covered earlier. I think with a little bit more focus on, finance in particular, I would say absolutely from the start, understand the risks and the finances as best you can, and the key elements of the finances. Understand the risks that the organization is exposed to. Get someone to tell you what they are, someone who knows a bit about, and get some people from different aspects of the organization. So maybe someone in the accounts department, if you like, or the treasurer or the head of finance, whoever it is. Just try and work out the key areas of the charity and ask someone about what they feel the risks are, because that really will help you understand where the dangers might lay and where perhaps areas of focus should be. And then on the accounts, understand the main, where does your money come from and what do you spend it on? And at any one point in time, what money's due out and what assets have you got, the basics of charity accounting. There's quite a lot of courses that do that sort of thing. And it is particularly nuanced for charities when it comes to financial management. So just understanding that it's not like a normal commercial organization on the money side. There are some important differences.
Catherine?
I wonder a bit about, and I think charities do this much better now than when I first started as a trustee, but much more of the induction, the buddying up with an existing trustee, the being made to feel welcome, the people taking the time to explain how the charity works, what the latest issues are, those sorts of things. I do remember the first trustee role I took on, I did speak in my first trustee meeting, and judging by the gasp that went round the room, I don't think as a new trustee you were meant to speak. It was very much you will work your way up to, being an equal on this board. And that's the bit where I sometimes think as well, it's getting to know the personalities, the other trustees. I think sometimes it's about saying, actually, I haven't got the time, or trustee board isn't your interest, but maybe being a member of a specific committee might be more your bag, where you might be saying, actually, I want to be on your fundraising committee, I want to be on your events committee. That's where, and I think sometimes it's having that confidence to push back a bit about the role you're being asked to take and say, actually, could it be more of this? And I just think there is much more around. You can be more effective more quickly if people are more welcoming and there's more of that kind of encouragement and support.
Yeah, I think I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think having the buddying or mentoring, I mean, depending on how, I think certainly a buddying system is really important. I think the other thing, I mean, my first trusteeship was the local village hall where we had no employees, and, turnover of, I think it was £10,000 a year, so relatively small. And I think, again, if you want to, starting small is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the first thing I had to do was explain to the management committee that they were also a board of trustees and they had all the responsibilities. So it was a bit the blind leading the blind. So my final question is, what makes a good trustee, James?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I think being very open-minded about matters. I think it's very in the context of you are a member of a team, as Catherine suggested earlier. I think being open-minded, you've got to understand you're one of a group who are ultimately, you've got to make the decision, but you've got to take on board an awful lot of information, opinions, considerations along the way. If you go in with premeditated and preconceived ideas, I think you're going to get yourself into trouble as a trustee. Personally, I think you've got to stay as open-minded as possible. To me, it's very much the nature of the role. You are not going to be involved in the day-to-day running of an organization, so you're not going to have the detailed, granular knowledge that you need to make decisions unilaterally on your own without any other thought. You've got to be a good absorber of information and come to you are going to have to come to a conclusion, but you've got to do it with an open mind.
I would agree with all of that, James. I think they're good points. And I think there is that mix of, does this person play nicely with other children? Can they share their toys? I do see quite a lot of comments on LinkedIn lately about people with lots of corporate experience becoming charity trustees and then thinking they're there to tell the chief exec how things should be done. And you think doesn't necessarily translate. It's not the way it works. It's not what you're there to do. So, it is that mix, isn't it, of being a decent person and, being respectful of others. I think it's that listening, patience piece, and realizing that things are different in the charity sector than they are in the different areas that we might come from. And, that's not necessarily a bad thing. We just all need to, breathe and learn from it, I think.
Yeah, I'm my first thing I would say to people is please read the papers, because if you come to a meeting and haven't actually done any preparation prior to, you're really turning around to everybody else around the table and saying to them you don't actually value their time. So that would be the first thing I would say. I think being open-minded, and again, this whole issue around, you can have some really robust conversations, but so long as you're focused on your beneficiaries, what's in their best interest and your purpose, generally you come to really good decisions. And there are occasions where certainly I've been in that I haven't actually agreed with what the decision we've made, but because collectively that's the majority of the trustees, I've said, okay, fine, I put my argument, but the majority is, and we must go along with that. The other thing I would say is be inquisitive. So, there are lots of areas you're going to deal with that you don't necessarily know a lot about, but don't be fearful of actually going in and do it. And the other thing is don't be afraid to ask questions, however stupid they are. I really encourage, I use the word copy, I shouldn't really, but people who will be vocal, who will give their opinion. And one of the things I find that if I said, what did I fear most, is that I probably say too much and I can dominate too much in a board meeting. That would be my biggest fear. I don't know. Do you guys have a biggest fear?
I think mine's a bit Hotel California. I don't want to be there forever. So I think that is where I think I want to know there's an exit there for me. I feel like I do have a usefulness shelf life where I've got energy, I've got ideas, but then no, I want to be off now. I think I need to make room for somebody else. So I think mine is that I need to know I can leave when I want to. Yeah.
James?
I think, I honestly think just getting it wrong. And I know that goes against a lot of what we said, doing your best here, but you've got to know you're limited by time and what you can actually do with the time you've got. As you said earlier, Charles, it's a volunteer role. You're not getting paid to do this 37 and a half hours a week. It is something that you have to pick up in your spare time, and I do always worry about something going on in a bit of the organization that I'm not particularly familiar with or not particularly involved in, which could be much more serious than anyone realizes and goes out of control. So I know that's very negative, but it does worry me with that sort of thing. You've got to be aware of the dangers.
Well, and I think, I suppose the question is, what do you fear most? I mean, the situations I've been in. So as a charity, we've been in the headlights of the press on a very negative campaign about something that was very difficult for us to control. In fact, we couldn't control whatsoever. And the best thing we did was actually say nothing. And from a trustee's perspective, that was quite frightening. I was threatened with we as a board were threatened with the Terrorism Act when we were trying to put baby incubators into Syria for one charity I was involved with. And there was a complete me being incensed about we were doing something good, and this was for people who were in really. And then you've got the law saying, well, actually, hold a second here, this could be funding terrorism, and there is some evidence towards that. And you go, well, actually, is that proportionate? And sometimes you just got to take a step back and think of a different way of approaching it. So that was certainly, I have to say, was a time where it was a bit scary. I don't know about you, Catherine. Are there sort of scary moments?
Yeah, there are scary. As anyone who knows me well would know, I hate litigation. So I do not like conflict, arguments, litigation. So whenever I'm a trustee of a charity that is facing a litigious situation, I do not enjoy being a trustee at that point. I just think that I didn't get involved with this charity to have a dispute and to be in the thick of it. But that's where I think you can take comfort from the other faces around the board table when you realize it's not just you on your own. But I think there is a limit for things I would accept in my day job that come as part and parcel of that role, and things that I would opt out of if that becomes too uncomfortable in a voluntary role. Ultimately, you can more easily step down from that.
And the other one from me was having to sign a report of accounts about being a going concern and not totally convinced that financially we were a going concern. Although I probably shouldn't say that in front of you, James.
He's letting it go. Fine.
He's letting it go. That's brilliant. Anyway, well, thank you, James and Catherine. And thank you, everybody, for listening.